And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker. So we have the following program today. Bianca is our speaker who's going to introduce the subject of peer review, because we understand not everybody's on the same page necessarily. So she'll bring us up to speed with what's going on in the area of peer review right now. And then we'll have a panel discussion with three panelists, one of whom is joining us online, and the other two are here in person. Bianca, after 15 years as the scholarly communication and open science librarian at the Utrecht University, started her practice as a in a consulting capacity, and still focuses on open science, open metadata, and open infrastructure. She's the founding member of the Initiative for Open Abstracts and a member of the preprint advisory group of Crossref, as well as Europe BMC and Literature Services Scientific Advisory Board of EMBL EBI. Without further ado, Bianca, the floor is yours. You have the clicker and the microphone.
Yes, thanks very much for the nice introduction. And thanks very much for having me here. I have the nice task to present sort of an overview, but I don't have to take the difficult positions today. I'm very happy to leave that to the panel. But I want to take you on a sort of a whirlwind tour of developments in peer review. And to start with, I'd like to challenge the notion a bit of traditional peer review as something that has been around for centuries, as something that is shaping our scientific outputs, as something that's perhaps shaping and is the decor for our research environment itself, because it's not so monolithic. Actually, at the time this tile was created, in the 17th century, the first scientific journal, first scholarly journal, didn't have peer review, so we didn't start out with this system of peer review. A bit of a history of what happened since then. I won't take you to the whole timeline, that's for another occasion. But we had the first society starting to use peer review in the 18th century. Then at the end of the 19th century, the first journal actually starting to use peer review. And as many of you know, journal science only started peer review after the Second World War, as did Nature a couple of decades later. And even then, there were different attitudes towards peer review and different movements towards changing aspects of peer review, towards more openness. In the 60s, journals experimenting with open commenting instead of or in addition to closed peer review. Nature, as I mentioned, archives started to allow posting preprints as another way of sort of opening up the system of publishing. BMJ started with non-blind peer review. BMC started with signed peer review report, and this is all prior or up to 2000. And at that time, around that time, Fiona Goodley, who was at that time with BMC, later became editor-in-chief of the Biomedical Journal. She wrote kind of a scathing report about the need for more openness in peer review. And if you read this, you would not be blamed for thinking this was written, like, say, 5 years ago or 2 years ago, but actually it was written in 2002. A plea for more openness, challenging the damage or the negative effects of closed peer review. So a lot has been happening. It's not a monolithic system. So the question, is peer review broken? Is perhaps a bit provocative, but it's still very much, that question has been asked throughout the decennia and is still being asked. So what are some of the aspects why peer review, what are the negative effects of the traditional peer review system? Perhaps the most important one, as far as I'm concerned, is that it mixes selection on quality, methodological quality, with selection on impact of importance, which is of course very much linked to our journal hierarchy system and the effects of that, of how science is selected, how the effects on rewards and recognition, the effects of scientific careers. Then delay in dissemination. Papers lingering in peer review for months and then perhaps being rejected and having to go to another journal. That whole process can take so long that by the time it's published, the research is perhaps not as relevant anymore as it would have been when it was first done. So you lose out in that delay in dissemination. Limited number of eyes. 2 or 3 people asked to peer review. Yes, experts, but are they experts on every aspect of a paper? Are they qualified to also look at the code, the data? So limited number of eyes in peer review can also limit what is being looked at. The whole process is being non-transparent. If an article is rejected, is it rejected on base of methodological quality or because it's not important enough? If it's accepted, are things missed in peer review? If it's a fully blind process, there's no way for readers to know. Bias in selection of peer reviewers. A lot of early career researchers who are not considered for peer review, who are not asked to be peer reviewers. A lot of researchers in non-Western countries, but perhaps not being approached by journals situated in Western countries. Bias in the peer reviews themselves. Because when it's closed, it's easier, perhaps, to be biased in your peer review, to say things you would maybe not say when the peer reviews themselves would be open. And we know quite striking examples of that. Of course, almost each of these points also has a flip side, and I'm more than confident that the panel discussion will touch on all these things. And finally, invisible labor. We are expected as researchers to do peer review, but it's invisible, and it often doesn't count towards, like, in your career. So how do we balance that? Especially with the growing number of publications, how do we balance the demand on the activity of peer review? As a result of these possible negative aspects of peer review, there have been a lot of developments over the last, say, 10 years, building on those developments that I just showed you from earlier. Developments around timing of peer review, publishing first, then do the peer review. Developments on the criteria for peer review, judging on soundness only and not on impact, for instance. Developments with journal independent peer review. Developments on open recruitment of peer reviewers. Developments on what is made available, whether the blindness aspect, whether peer reviewers are blind to the author or vice versa, or if it's a totally open process, whether the peer reports themselves are published or not, whether the names of peer reviewers are published or not. And these are separate aspects. So the moniker open peer review can mean actually any of these aspects, and it doesn't mean that everything needs to be open. And finally, also experiments around giving credit for peer review. Are there monetary credits or credit in recognition, being visible as a reviewer? Different developments there. So whether peer review is broken or not, it's at least becoming more and more fragmented. And that also opens up possibilities. Don't know if you're familiar with this term of kintsugi, which I really like, and I was really happy to use it today, which is sort of bringing together, repairing shards of what has been broken, but then make something better out of it. And interestingly, it can also mean making different combinations, making a new system of peer review that's more fit for purpose. And what it could look like, well, there are many different opinions on that. But what we're seeing at the moment is really different ways are developing of organizing dissemination and evaluation of scientific knowledge outside the traditional journal system. And I'd like to give a few examples of this, starting from the idea that journals both have a role in dissemination of knowledge and evaluation of knowledge. Is it that those functions are carried out within a journal? When you look at preprint servers and repositories, you could say that those very much serve the function of dissemination without or with limited evaluation. Of course, it differs depending on which preprint server. And then there are peer review platforms, independent peer review platforms, that only concern themselves with evaluation and not with the further dissemination. So you can separate those functions of publishing. And then you can end up with different constellations of how that works in practice. And just a few examples. One of the ways this could look like is the extended journal, where instead of one journal, you have on one platform a preprint server, a journal, and also a peer review platform. And that's something, for instance, that F1000 started with quite a while ago yet. And that's still, as a model, being used and taken up by more and more organizations. Or you could have a mixed system, where you have journals, you have peer reviews, preprint servers and repositories, and you have peer review platforms, and they interact in a number of different ways. But in that system, all those three things exist separately. And one instance is Review Commons, which organizes journal independent peer review, but linked to affiliate journals that can then use the peer-reviewed articles. But you do not submit your article to that journal. You first submit it to the peer review, and afterwards it can be published in one of these journals. Another example, Peer Community In, that reviews preprints. And interestingly, that could be enough in itself. You have a preprint, you have the peer review, you have the sort of the judgment. This does do an accept reject, and that's it. But interestingly, they made the move to also then start their Peer Community In journal, because they experienced that people were unwilling to go the Peer Community In route because they still wanted to publish in a journal. So they now also have their Peer Community In journal, where after peer review you can publish in their journal. And then eLife is also experimenting with that. I know Anna's on the panel, so she will be able to talk more to that. Where first they decided to only review manuscript when they were first published as a preprint, so that was a requisite. And they would post the reviews alongside the preprint, so separating that from the journal itself, from the necessary step in the journal itself. And now they have gone one step further, which is very interesting, where they do not do the accept, reject decision anymore as a journal. They will peer review, the peer review will be available, then it's up to the author whether they want to consider their article published. So they're taking away a very interesting part, journal function, that selection function. They still do the peer review, but they take away that accept, reject decision. And this has caused a lot of discussion in the scientific community. And then finally, you could consider a step where there's no journal involved at all, where you only have preprint servers, repositories, and peer review platforms. As I said, Peer Community In is an example towards that, but they did decide to add a journal into the mix. Another platform, Pre-Review, which encourages peer review by anyone, so taking away that bias in selection of peer reviewers. And they organize peer review on preprint servers completely separate from any subsequent journal publishing. And more on the technical side, the Notify project is working on enabling the connections between peer reviews and preprint servers or repositories to be able to link both, also without any journals involved. And I should say that all these initiatives are linked in the presentation if you want to explore them. So that leaves the question, all these initiatives, all these movements, all these developments in peer review really lead to the question, when is peer review fit for purpose? Is that a more traditional peer review? Or do we need other systems that can be multiple shapes, multiple colors, and that are really fit for purpose? And to answer that question, one thing I want to end with is that it's very important to also ask, whose purpose is that? Is that the purpose of the researchers? Is that the purpose of the scientific journals? And perhaps, as a bit of a warning, one of the last images I found when looking for the kintsugi technique was these nice semi-Delft blue tiles sold, which are not repaired, which just have a little golden line added to the tile and are then sold for a lot of money. So buyer beware. So that concludes my overview of peer review. I hope to have touched on some of the pain points in peer review, some of the new developments that are going on, and thereby providing some input for the panel discussion. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for a very interesting presentation. Our apologies to participants online for some mess that has been going on. It's now under control, and please do let us know if there are any other interruptions. And now, I would like to give the floor to our panelists and moderator, Frederik Belliard, who is the lead for the Open Publishing Project at the Open Science Program and the coordinator of TU Delft Open. She's a lifelong advocate for open science and open publishing, but I would let her introduce herself and do further introductions of our panelists. Thanks.
Is that working? Well, thank you, Tanya. I don't think I need to add more. I'm really passionate about open science and peer review. So the first panelist is Yunzi. And Yunzi is one of our editor-in-chief from the Journal of Open Aviation Science, focusing on open peer review. You can introduce yourself better than me.
Yeah, so is it working? Test. All right, test. No? Let me check. Test. Out of battery. No, it works. Thank you very much. Yeah, so my name is Junzi Son. I'm from aerospace engineering faculty. So I am currently assistant professor. So I started my PhD in 2015, also in TU Delft. At that time, at least in the domain of aerospace, open science was not a thing. So when I published my first open source software, it was like people come to me and say, oh, yeah, it's such a nice thing that you did. So from my perspective, coming from a different background of telecommunication or computer science oriented, is something quite normal. So I would say that there's stark contrast between aerospace and other domain of science. So I started to push for the open science in general, not only about peer review. So I helped move forward with sharing the data from our research, sharing the software from our research, as well as a new initiative working with Frederik is to push for a new journal called Journal of Open Aviation Science. So the focus is on aviation, so civil aviation, so air transportation, anything related to this perspective. And it's a small community in terms of researchers as well. So we're just started, I think, in autumn last year. And we don't have any paper published in the journal yet, so everything I say here is kind of my wish list. So, but I will be happy to share my idea with you.
Yeah, thank you, Yunzi. The second panel is Anna Akmanova. She's part of eLife, and she is online. So, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So it's wonderful to be part of this event. My name is Anna Akmanova. I'm currently a senior editor of eLife. I've also been deputy editor of eLife for the past 5 years. And I'm also a scientist. I'm cell biologist from Utrecht University and professor in cellular dynamics in Utrecht University studying mammalian cells. But today I will be participating in the discussion in my role as an editor of eLife. And eLife is a broad life sciences journal which has been introducing different innovations in scientific publishing since it has been launched in 2012. It unites approximately 900 reviewing editors and more than 100 senior editors, all working scientists who work together trying to think of ways how the deficits and problems in scientific publishing, particularly in life sciences, can be solved and improved.
Thank you, Anna. And the third panelist is Bas Hofland. He is also an editor-in-chief of one of our journals. He can introduce himself. So, it's better.
Yeah. It's good.
Thank you, Frederik. Yeah. Hello, I'm Bas Hofland. Is this working? Yeah. I'm from across the street, civil engineering, hydraulic engineering, specializing in coastal structures, so doing a lot of tests also on these. And working, well, again, for 7 years when I came back from Deltaris here. And in our community, we also felt an open source, a diamond open access journal which is actually free, missing. So 2 years ago we started the Journal of Coastal and Hydraulic Structures. That was my introduction to the open science. And this is like free to publish and to read, so it's really open. So of course the peer reviews are done for free, so these costs, they don't show up. And some specifics of this, no, this is my experience I talk from. Some specifics of this journal are that it's, well, it is community-based, so we want, because these editors are very important in giving out the peer reviews, we have quite a broad, 14 people-wide international community-based editorial board. So, and we really try to randomly let these editors select the reviewers for the journals. And another thing is we have the double-blind review. So at the moment of reviewing, the paper is made anonymous, and the reviewers are anonymous. So there is no bias towards who has written what. And after publication, the reviewers remain anonymous. So then afterwards it's single-blind. And this works for us at the moment. So we now have two volumes of about 10 papers. So it's starting reasonably well.
Thank you. I would like to start with one question following the presentation of Bianca. She was talking about alternative review process, you know, double-blind peer review, open peer review. But now there is a push for review of preprint of data and software. I would like to have your opinion. What are the benefits and the drawbacks? So maybe we can start with Anna, which is online, and if you can tell us your opinion about this, and if eLife is considering those kind of things. I know for preprint, but for data, for example.
Yes, eLife has been from the start very enthusiastic about reviewing preprints. Already more than 1.5 years ago, we started with the policy that we only review papers that are available as preprints. And the reason for that is we think that open sharing of scientific data is best achieved when the authors are ready to share, and this is best achieved of the preprint server. Our favorite preprint server is bioRxiv. It is for free to share the papers there, and we think that that's important because it gives the most important handle to the authors to disseminate their work when they are ready. This became very clear during the times of COVID, when it was not possible to review most of the scientific work that has been coming out, simply because peer reviewers, if you would ask them, they would say, I'm sorry, I'm not reviewing any papers, I'm writing my own papers. So but it was very important to share information very quickly. That's also medRxiv, the preprint server for medical papers, boosted enormously, because that was the time when also the wide public learned the word preprint. And that's when it became clear that when there is urgency in sharing scientific data, preprints are the way to go. But scientific information needs to be peer reviewed. We saw also plenty of examples of that during COVID. Studies that were openly shared sometimes were not solid or not sufficiently supported by data, and only peer review by experts can solve this problem. And that's why the model publish or disseminate first through preprints and then peer review for eLife became like absolutely a default, which is now also favored by a lot of other participants in the life sciences community.
Yeah.
In terms of reviewing data, we are in principle positive about it, but there has to be some kind of format in which the data should be peer reviewed. So at the moment, eLife concerns itself with peer reviewing preprints of papers and not data sets.
Thank you, Anna. I will ask you a follow-up question. I know you do double-blind peer review with your journal. You don't deposit your, your author do not have to deposit their paper manuscript in the preprint server, but you do publish the review report.
Yeah.
So why don't you ask your author to deposit their paper in a preprint so it can be reviewed?
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit, I think, also habits, the culture of the field, and this is how we are used to doing it. I myself also like clarity. So if you have many versions of a paper, then if you're referring to it, which version are we referring to? You already have that also on the on all the systems that you on Google Scholar you get 5 copies of something similar. So it, yeah, and also the urgency. Maybe our fields there's not too much lives at stake, and so these few months extra actually do not hurt that much. So it is then I think better to immediately give the sort of final results, and then the quality of the peer review can be just seen by the text that has been written that is published next to the final paper. And of course, the final paper can still be wrong. It remains science, but then, yeah, we can go to a next paper.
Yeah, and Yunzi, I mean, your concept of your new journal is open peer review, and also you want to actually review the code and the data.
Yeah.
So
it's quite challenging. So still, it's a wish list, but we're actually pushing for it. So. Just one question for the audience here. So what is the reason prevent you or your colleague sharing the preprint? Right, there is one of the several of these main reason is that if you put the preprint and if it get rejected, what happens to the preprint, right? So this is one major concern if a researcher will think, yeah, I want to guarantee that my paper get published before I can share something, right? A second understanding from a concern that maybe someone else will take your work and then try to claim as theirs. But I think the second kind of thought is relatively it's easy to deal nowadays because everything is aligned. The plagiarism check is also checking about the preprint. So this is kind of things that no longer exist. So the first thing is we want to make sure that the publication barrier is lower. Maybe sounds very counterintuitive to you. The reason for that is that we are, as an editor, and also the reviews, a number of reviews, let's say 3 reviews, are not the person to judge that if the paper should be published or not. Well, in a lot of cases we can, but not always the case, right? So what we want to put in place is that we want to make very strict rules for people who submit the paper. So they share the preprint, they share the data, the DOI must already be accessible, they share the code. And they have to have a very strong section on the reproducibility of the research. So once this requirement are met, and if they send it to our journal, we get this checked first, and then we will make sure the publication barrier is much lower. So most likely we'll get published because this any small contribution, now we're all doing very small contribution, is a contribution to the science in general, as long as there's no plagiarism, as long as there's no false claim of things, right? So those are the critical things the editor and the reviewer should be checking. So in this sense, we're trying to lower the barrier of publication, but we are increase the barrier of submission. So when you submit something, you better stick to all this open requirement. Again, we're a small community, so it's not a big problem. Right? If we have less paper, it's not an issue. We're not looking for impact factor or so. It's just a small movement to encourage people to share more about the research approaches. And in terms of data and software, very luckily we have assembled a list of editors globally who are quite tech savvy. We each of us are specialized in some part of the data and software. So. I think with a small number of a paper that we're aiming in the beginning, it should be easy to handle. But of course, if we imagine that dozens of paper, or let's say 50 papers per year, then we might run into problems. So standardization, I think, should be in the short future to be think about. Yeah, how we can make this process more standard, how we can invite more people to be involved in the development of this open process, open review process.
But that also means the peer review process in that system is fragmented because you have your article and you need a set of experts for that, but for the data or the code, you need another set of reviewers.
Yeah.
So that's very complicated. And on top of that, you have to think about a mechanism to recognize, Bianca touched about it, to recognize the work of the reviewers.
Yeah.
So how do you make, this is very complicated, how to make sure people can do that?
Yeah, the review, in fact, will be published. And 1 year ago, before we started, we were worried about, what about copy editing, how we can handle all this like a language check. But now it's very nicely as a ChatGPT, we could simply use it to help us rewrite, reformulate the words and make it more consistent, right? So I would envision that is not going to be an issue. So we will be very open to the authors and the review in the beginning. Say, okay, once you submit, this is going to be open. Your name will be known. If you submit a review, your name also be known. If you feel like, there's something that you don't want to say about it, it's fine. You don't need to become a reviewer. But I think the constructive criticism always comes with openness. Otherwise, I don't know how to guarantee that.
Yeah, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, about so that I think the very big role is for the editor in that. So that is if you have this very blunt, unsubstantiated review, then the editor should just send it back or remove it. Yeah. So I think there are other ways to prevent. And so I'm a bit old-fashioned maybe that I like to have the complete openness of reviewers to say what they want, and it might be slightly negative, but you also prepare for that, and to also have the possibility to reject something, because we can have a lot of data, but in the end it's not the information, and we are the knowledge or the wisdom, and this last tip, that is what we want to publish, because otherwise we have to redo the entire analysis. So for me, it's more to publish this final result.
Yeah, but you publish the result, but without the name of the reviewer, because you have a double blind.
Yeah, but the review itself is published, so
you don't get it recognized.
Yeah, but the reviewer is not recognized, so it's not.
Oh, there's these other systems for that, like the Publons to recognize them.
But the idea we have is actually say that again, wish list is that the reviewer will actually become the author of this reviewer paper. So in addition to each paper that's been published, there will be a second review paper that is talking about this. And reviewer doesn't have to review everything. If they are comfortable with only with one section, just do that section. Ignore everything else. That's fine.
So that's actually very nice. So here's a question I have about open peer review. Does it contribute to the quality of the review of the paper or not? What are I can ask a question to Anna online. What do you think?
Yes. So first of all, so let me clarify. So we're just discussing whether reviewer names should be open or not. We have been debating this a lot at eLife and concluded that it's better in open reviews. So if the reviews are published together with the paper, not to reveal reviewer names, to keep it consistent. And there were two reasons. First of all, we noticed because eLife publishes like 100 papers a month and receives on average hundreds of papers each month. So our throughput is really large. And we saw that on average, younger researchers would be more careful with criticizing work of their seniors, especially when they are dependent on them and the community. So which affects how peer reviews are written. Our second concern about that was, which for me has always been a bigger concern, and that's concern about positive reviews, because we are very worried that when all names are open, you get into the social media kind of positive feedback thing. I positively review your paper, you positively review my paper, we publish everything online, we all get a paper out of it because I am also acknowledged as an author. So it's not corruption, but it is a kind of a positive feedback generating products for everyone, which does not necessarily encourage constructive criticism. And that's why we felt that it would be cleanest and the easiest to just keep all the public reviews anonymous. Then how does open review or public review, as we call it, affect the quality of reviews? It affects it greatly because the purpose of reviews is different. And if you write a text for a different purpose, it's a different text. The review written for public consumption is the review for the readership of the paper, mostly. And the review, which is currently written for journals, is for the editors and the authors. These are two different audiences. And this very strongly influences the content of the review and the language of the review. Just to give you one example, if you write a review to authors, and many life sciences reviewers do that, their review would only consist of sentences containing question marks. Have the authors considered this? Have the authors performed this experiment? How did the authors analyze these data? Was this analysis performed, etc.? Question mark. So one of my ideas was in public reviews to make them really useful for public consumption to forbid question mark at all as a punctuation mark, because that would solve that problem thoroughly. Because a public review is not a questionnaire for the public, it is the list of the reviewers' thoughts about what the authors have achieved and what not. And it has to be balanced. And that's also a very important thing, because a review towards written for editors typically would emphasize the deficits, the weak points of the paper, while in a public review, it is extremely important that the reviewer also states clearly what they think are the strengths. And that's what also eLife has been working in the past years, trying to teach people how to write reviews, which would be useful for public consumption.
Thank you. You want to follow up on that, Bas?
Well, I think this is a nice question, and I think we will certainly also use this to instruct our blind reviewers to also they pay. But typically, well, you start with one section on the positive things, and then you start with all the negative or all the positive feedback. Let's say. So it's. I like the thoughts.
Yeah, I like the approach.
Yeah.
This is something we should consider for TDF Open Publishing.
Yeah. Some courses for the reviewers.
The conscious review. Yunzi, no? Is it fine?
Yeah. This is. I think we're all on the same
You're
line
on
here.
the same
Yes.
page.
There's no. Yeah.
So if you are talking about reviewers, I mean, we know typically I've been to so many conferences, and when you have the question, should we pay the reviewers or not? I always end up in a conversation, it's 50-50. People say, yes, we should pay them. The other half, we shouldn't pay them. So should we, if we are talking about open access journal, Diamond open access publisher, should reviewers still do this work for free for commercial publishers?
No. I've received comments right now ask for reviews. If it's a closed journal, I would say I don't want to review this paper because it's not open access.
Oh.
Yeah. At least from my perspective, I think I've talked to some researcher recently in Sweden, and he does also the same. He only reviews a paper that has actually a preprint already. So he will not accept the review unless there's a preprint. So it's maybe a small group of researchers, but I think it's important that publisher doesn't benefit from the free service of the researchers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bas?
Yeah, I also think the cost aspect is quite So, but at the moment it is custom to do it. So I don't think, because if you really want to pay full, it's €1,000 a day. So we need a few €1,000 per paper. So where do we get this? And we don't get this from the publishers, because this money goes somewhere else. The non-open publishers. So yeah, it's just not feasible to pay real prices. So and why do we still do it? Because I still sometimes accept these things, and that is because you want to help the best journals with the best quality, and often they are still closed or semi-closed, so that's actually why we should have good alternatives that also still fit a little bit in the system, because the system is built on the little bit childish notion of impact factors and publishing in high impact factor journals. So we are a little bit stuck to that. But I think if we give good alternatives, it will be easier to say no to the closed journals in a while.
Yeah, but Anna, what's your take on it? And also, maybe it should be automatic to have this reward and recognition system in place. I mean, there are some people who try to do that here with the open science program, but not everything is in place. So maybe this is something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are many aspects to this. So first is paying reviewers. That I think is not feasible just because how much would you pay for peer review? 50 euros? I don't know, $100? I mean, administering that, just the administration costs would be enormous. So which would make the publishing a very, very expensive exercise. So it's just not practical, especially as we know how incredibly important it is to have a very broad range of reviewers. I mean, there is good data that even like if you have all male reviewers and you are female as the last author, being accepted is less than if you are a male. There are numbers for that. So which shows that diversity in all levels, also in terms of geography, nationality, it makes a huge difference. So administering payments, even for reviewing grants in one country, is already very difficult. So if you would like to administer payments throughout the world to very diverse reviewers, that's just simply not feasible. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspects are like how do we organize peer review? So, Frederick, what you wanted me to focus on? Can you say it again?
I was just to say, see, I mean, if the reviewer keep doing this work, maybe we should put in place a reward recognition system.
Yeah, so I mean, exactly. Yeah. So how do we put in some kind of recognition and reward system? So the way it works now in life sciences is based basically on that you know the editors and the editors know you, and that you also have easier access to publishing because if the editors know you as a peer reviewer, it's also they appreciate also your work as an author. So there is this aspect to it. So formalizing this somehow and really recognizing people who peer review a lot can be done in principle through publons, and probably introducing such a system would be good. I must say that in small communities, it works by itself very well because people just know who is frequently reviewing. Also, like if, for example, you use scientific editors in your process like eLife does. But indeed, I would agree that thinking of ways how people can be recognized by being good citizens and responding positively to review requests would be very good, because one of the biggest challenges of being an editor, at least in life sciences, is finding someone willing to review a particular paper.
I think it's in every field difficult to find reviewers. I think here at the TLF, I know we try to put in place a reward and recognition system and to make sure our researchers are recognized for that. So it is expected for every teacher, every professor to review, but then that should be in the job description. And the manager should acknowledge that this is part of your job. I don't know the in and out of everything, but I think that should be automatic. They shouldn't have to do that for free. Nothing is ever free, like my colleague like to say, but there are hidden costs. I just wanted to know if somebody in the audience has some question to for the panelists. No? Oh, Nicoletta, sorry.
Hi, Nicolette Anastasia from TU Library. I heard reviews for public consumption, Anna, and I was wondering, open reviews, review reports, and reviews for public consumptions, are they the same?
I think a matter of terms. So basically, if your paper is accompanied by peer reviews, that's when the public can consume them. So that's one way. So that's how you get these different communities who publish peer reviews of preprints. Another way how many journals do it, at least in life sciences, is publish full reviews, responses, and also decision letters when the paper is published. The big difference is that if a paper is not published in a journal, then all the peer review work is lost. While if the journals review preprints and then publish the peer reviews right away along with the preprints after the review, then this work is not lost. And there is a strong opinion in the community that it would be very favorable to not, because basically what happens in life sciences a lot, you send your paper to a journal X, it reviews it, rejects it, so everything is lost. You send it to the journal Y, it reviews it, it rejects it, everything is thrown away, and so it goes until your paper lands somewhere, and that journal probably will publish the peer reviews. But if you would start with the preprint and have the reviews deposited along with the preprint, then in principle this peer review work will be public, it will be open, because it will be accompanying a openly available preprint, and in this way, so you create public open reviews of public open preprints. So a lot of people in the community think that that is how the whole thing should develop.
Thank you.
We have a few, so
This is a question for Bas and Zuni. So you have different perspectives on peer review, which I think is driven because your communities are different. What would you say are the decisive things within your communities that mean you have different views towards peer review?
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
thanks. Yeah. No, thanks. So it's a bit more classical. So also in response to the last thing, we heard a lot of people that don't like a negative. So if it was open and it is then rejected, that there was really some fright for that. And also that a lot of people are still in the system of impact factors, so they still wanted like a classical journal that can get an impact factor at a certain moment. That was very important for all, because we have this editorial board, not of the highly esteemed professors that are already there, but everybody's still on the ladder upwards, somewhere in the middle. Then it still matters whether there is an impact factor. So we wanted something that still fits into the somewhat flawed classical system.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's completely different, because the aerospace is already very closed in aviation as well. So when I started my PhD in 2015, around that time, there is an initiative called Open Sky Initiative. So what we do is we kind of collect data and share it openly. And that has grown so much in a way that people have not expected. So a lot of researchers, hundreds of research institutes are now using this kind of data. So if you look at from traditional perspective, you never notice that. You say, yeah, everyone wants to keep their data for themselves. Why would they share, right? But the fact is that I have a student started master with me just 2 weeks ago, and she was able to just download the data from the Open Sky and then start, all this analysis. And in old days, it would not be possible because you have to contact the author, ask them for data. Maybe they will not give it to you. Yeah. So in a way that we are trying to work against what the industry has, or the traditional aviation industry has been given us. So we're fighting a little bit like uphill battle here, but I think there's a lot of momentum. So for this journal, we also had a support from at least 6-7 different researchers from 6-7 different countries. Yeah, France, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, America, and even South America. So all this, we're together trying to push this. And it's a little bit wishful thinking, but we are not aiming for impact factors, and we make it very clear that if you're aiming for impact factors, this is not the place for you. But if you want to, for example, reproduce the results and then share the results, here is a place. Yeah, for example. Yeah.
Thanks. Perhaps just cycling quickly back to what Anna said about the community, also what the community wants in publishing peer reviews, also for papers that have not been accepted. In addition to what journals like eLife are doing in that respect, I just want to mention the initiative Publish Your Review, which is community-driven from ASAP Bio, among others, who are encouraging, if you are a reviewer and the paper you are reviewing is available as a preprint, to then also publish your review, if needed, without the specific recommendation to the journal, but really a methodological review, to also publish that either as a comment on the preprint or somewhere else, and also collaborating with journals to get that more accepted. So that's, I think, an initiative building on what Anna just said, that's striving for the same thing.
Hi, Eva Kamer from TU Delft. We hear initiatives that you presented, and I also heard that, yeah, there are some maybe higher level or abstract goals for these initiatives, like disrupting the current system of aviation industry. It is a systematic problem, of course, what is related to publishing and peer review, embedded in the whole scientific life cycle. How do you foresee the higher goals of your initiatives? Can you disrupt the current system by doing it from bottom up? Or would you need an institutional or higher level support for that?
Maybe I can say something. I mean, the biggest problem, and this was already mentioned a couple of times, this is the need for impact factors or some kind of currency. Because, so the system that we currently have is basically that you get paid for the quality of your work with the journal name in which with the name of the journal in which you publish your work. And can we get rid of this altogether? So in principle, there is a strong push to do it. There is the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, which has been signed by NWO, the Association of Universities, by the European Research Council, very many big funders and many institutions. So we all agree that we have to move away from impact factors and from using journal names as currency for the quality of science because of its limitation. The problem with signing DORA and with implementing it is that nobody has so far introduced an alternative. And is the alternative needed in the first place? Now, we heard a very strong advocate who said, no, I mean, we can just deal with it in a small community, and then we don't actually need it, we don't care about it. But in big communities, like say in a medical community, cancer research is thousands of researchers, millions of patients. So you have to judge which research is important and impactful and which not. There are thousands of papers showing up every day. So you need a process called curation. You cannot just just have publish and peer review and leave it there. You need some kind of quality assessment. So what eLife has been suggesting is, so what is a journal name? Basically, it tells you, at least in my field, okay, so this person has a Nature paper. They discovered something extraordinary and it's very solid. Or this is, let's say, a Journal of Cell Science, this nice solid paper with about some detail of how cells work. Now, in principle, you can express that in normal human words. And then it will not be one word, but it will be a short phrase or maybe two sentences, which would say that this is an extraordinary idea, but would need more experimental support. Or this is a very solid data set, which has been reviewed by experts in the field that will be a wonderful resource for the field. So, and then in principle, you can say it in one sentence. And at least, so there are researchers who think that that would be one way how really thoroughly to change the publishing system is to try to, we need curation, we cannot get rid of curation, but to express it in normal human words, make it richer, and generated based on broader assessments, perhaps from more peer reviews that also could perhaps consult each other, discuss with each other where on the whole ranking to place this paper now, and maybe after some time after the dust has settled. So in an ideal world, probably that's where we would want at least life science publishing to go. But for that, we need to start using this system and gradually basically change the currency of assessment and curation of papers. And then we could get rid of the journal names and we could get rid of brands that go with them, like Nature or some big Elsevier brands. And then that would be a real reform in scientific publishing.
Yes. You want to?
Yeah, yes, please. Thanks. I largely agree with that these names are an issue, but I also think it will be very difficult to get rid of the names. So I think that is how humans are conditioned, and we like simple things. So actually, the alternative we are trying to make is. And what is the problem actually with names? So if we have a good name, that gives a good recommendation. But it's like a monopoly we are giving away. So we are doing all the reviewing for free, and then we're giving this monopoly away to some publisher, which can ask 4 or 5, 6,000 euros for the same service that costs 400 euros at the other journal. So that's why I think a Diamond Open Access journal, where you just don't pay anything for it. So we are already doing all the reviews. So this last 20% of the cost, and for that we should give this away, and somebody can charge 5,000 euros. So, and that's why I think this small disruptive, if we are able to establish a good impact factor journal, Diamond Open Access, then we will get a lot of papers, I think. We will be tenfold. And so we only have to get this impact factor definitely next year. And then I think it's quite easy to be disruptive, because then we have two good quality things, 2,000 euros, 0 euros. Yeah, and then I think it will be easily to make this brand wider known.
Yeah, but also it's also about a big cultural change about training. I mean, how people work, think.
Yeah,
it's everything related.
But the people, I think they like nature very good. That is the how do you say that? Yeah, but that's I think just this will be very difficult to get these reasonably thinking, well-thinking people that don't go by their guts. So just try to adapt to that system.
Yeah. No,
I would just let me to add one thing, because I think the goal is not to substitute nature for something called diamond or whatever, and just change one word for another, because then we will not be anywhere. And also it's not about open access, because I mean there are journals that are open access, and so it's really about changing so how we evaluate science in a more rich way than just attaching to a paper one word and defining the quality of one paper with one simple word, whatever that word is. That is, I think, the key. Without that, we would never change scientific publishing.
Okay, last question.
Ivan Niskodin, TU Delft. Original purpose for peer review is to have a standard quality. But now we see that the explosion of journals, new journals, and publications, that I think it's the filtering function. It's very important. And if I look at my field, what published in the journals 10 years ago, and what is sustainable, what is interesting today from this retrospectively, and I'm really very skeptical about how sustainable knowledge which we now produce. Maybe it's more, I think, big percentage of scientific waste. And I'm very curious on your opinion from 3 journals. If it's such 100 articles a month, it's really a big amount. What do you think, what your expectation after 10 years, which will still be still will have a quality after a time of 10 years, for instance?
Yeah, Yunzi, can you start?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. It's actually very challenging for me to answer this one, but I'll try my best. I think if we look at the development of human science history, right, this will be exponential, and I do believe that in the future there'll be much more ideas, much more new things coming in the rate that, there's not enough reviewers. So that's why I also try to connect to the previous question, is that the bottom-up approach might in fact be the end approach. So no one is going to be an expert in the full topic of a paper is. If you're comfortable of contributing to a paper by commenting it, just comment on one session, specific data session or whatever that you can do, right? So in the end, I do envision that the idea of a publisher, I hope, will go away, but this synergy between the researchers has become more stronger in the future. And to answer the question, I hope that in the future, the big names will go away, and we'll be able to find information by the quality of the research rather than names of publisher.
Bas?
Yeah, thanks. I also think that cost is a big driver here. If we have commercial gold open access publishers that make money out of publishing it, they will be soon to accept. So if you don't have this profit aim, it's much easier to decline things, and you can be strict, and you can say, combine these two papers to one better one, to really go to the wisdom instead of the knowledge or instead of the data. So I think just economics are a very big driver in this.
Anna, you have the final word.
Yeah, I also think that economics is the big driver, and that the number of papers scales also with the number of researchers. Because while I totally see that it can be very profitable for the science to combine smaller papers into big ones and make them more solid, on the other hand, one also has to think about careers of researchers. For a life scientist researcher, it can take 4 or 5 years to produce even one paper, and maybe incomplete one. So if it will take 10 years to publish really a big solid story, it means that it's like 2 PhDs after each other. So, and that's why I think it's inevitable that the number of papers keeps scaling with the size of the scientific effort. And we have to adapt our evaluation system and our publishing system to that. And from that point of view, actually having papers being living things for the time being of their useful lifetime actually is one possibility, that you don't finalize your paper, but you preprint it, have it peer reviewed, and then people who have done that are acknowledged for that, but then that you can augment it later and maybe publish a better version of it with a new version of peer reviews. So that's the kind of the future that I would like to see, at least for my field. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our session. So I would like to thank Anna to join us online, and Bas and Yunzi and everyone else for attending.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Frederic, and indeed all the panelists. Thank you, Bianca, for a wonderful presentation. Thanks you also for co-organizing this, and also I would like to extend the thanks to the New Media Center, who made this possible online, and hopefully with a nice recording afterwards. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you at our next event.